I just wanted to welcome everyone to the Unchained Capital webinar series. My name is Justine Harper, and I'm the VP of Concierge. And today I'm joined by Perley, who's a team lead and software engineer, and Tyler Campbell, technical director of Concierge. Like I mentioned earlier, today's going to be a little bit more technical, but this week we are focusing on Caravan, Unchained stateless multi-sig coordinator, which can be used as a free-to-use open source solution for recovery, which we just discussed. We will be discussing next week if you want to tune in for that as well, but also can be used as a multi-sig wallet management. So today, Tyler and Buck are going to be walking you through even what Caravan is, how to use it, what it looks like, and then how to do actually creating a wallet within it. And then Buck's going to actually show you some more advanced features like coin management and child pays for parent transactions, which is what allows you to pay a higher fee for an existing pending transaction, as well as overview the testing suite. We will be taking questions after each segment, so pull up that Q&A box or in the chat. I'll be monitoring that and throwing them out when we can and get those answered. We'll also have a full 15 to 20 minutes after to do general questions as well. So if we don't get to them in each segment, we will try to get to them at the end. This will be recorded and you can review it on the YouTube channel of Unchained as well. So to get started though, I'm going to hand it over to Tyler, who's going to go over some important key terms and then jump right into the demo. So get going, Tyler.
Awesome. Thank you, Justine. So in diving into key terms, our first key term that we're going to talk about today is going to be Bitcoin addresses. So Bitcoin addresses, this is where your Bitcoin live, right? Bitcoin live on addresses, not on your devices. So addresses are represented by alphanumeric strings. There's an example under the word address on the right-hand side of my screen. There's also, it's common for addresses to be represented in QR code format. Maybe if you're on a mobile device, you might be familiar with that as well. So Bitcoin addresses and the balances on these Bitcoin addresses live on the Bitcoin blockchain. And the really cool thing and really powerful thing about the Bitcoin blockchain is that all the economic activity that's been coordinated on the Bitcoin blockchain over the past 12 years still only amounts to about 350 gigabytes of total size. So as technology and storage capacity improves, hopefully one day we'll be able to have a copy of the Bitcoin blockchain on something like our mobile phones. That is, that helps for decentralization of the network, really helping to enforce those monetary policy rules, that hard cap of 21 million that we all know and love. So Bitcoin addresses, it's most important to recognize that Bitcoin addresses are constructed from keys. So Bitcoin addresses can be constructed from one key in a single signature format, or many public keys in a multi-signature format. So Bitcoin addresses are constructed from public keys. Using a block explorer, so on the example on the right, we have blockstream.info, you can enter a Bitcoin address and see balance information in a really transparent manner. So that's kind of a high-level overview of what Bitcoin addresses are. But if Bitcoin addresses are constructed from public keys, that leads us into our next key term of public keys. So Bitcoin addresses are constructed from public keys. You can think about a public key as a lock to a given address. So a private key, which we'll touch on in a second, is used to unlock Bitcoin that's on a given address, and the public key is the lock to that address. So public keys are just public data that are generated from a private key, and they're used to construct an address. Now, hardware wallets like Trezors, Ledgers, Cold Cards, and a few others share public keys with wallet software like Unchained or Trezor.io or Electrum to build addresses. So with the public key comes a corresponding private key. That's a public-private key pair. So the private key is the key that is again used to unlock Bitcoin from an address. Hardware devices know how to use these private keys to sign transactions and unlock and spend Bitcoin. So again, Bitcoin is not on your device, is not held on your device, but the keys to unlock and move your Bitcoin is held on your device. So we have public and private keys, but there's all other phrases you may have heard about just in general Bitcoin discourse. And a really popular and very, very important one is the seed. Your seed is your master key. So this is your 12 or 24 words that you have as your master key. And this is the most important item that you can protect. The reason why it's the most important item to protect is because with your seed, you can derive nearly infinite public and private key pairs and therefore Bitcoin addresses. So your seed is literally the seed from which everything else is derived. Using your seed, you can derive extended public keys, which we'll touch on in a second, public keys, and therefore addresses. So it's really, really important that we're always securing our seed and securing it physically. Devices are not perfect. They can break over time, and we want to make sure that we're holding generational wealth in a secure way. I don't want to be able to plug in my device in 10 years time and have my Trezor device, for example, not work, or have one of my hardware devices not be around. Maybe I lost it. So storing and securing your seed physically is really, really powerful, because leveraging the Bitcoin network, you can use your seed to recover your wallet on a different device. So seed is a popular phrase you may have heard, very, very important for you to protect. Along with seeds are Xpubs. So Peter McCormick down there in his screenshotted tweet kind of made this popular in late 2020 about asking you, what is an Xpub? An Xpub is a master lock. So if a public key is thought of as a lock to a given address, an Xpub, or an extended public key, can be thought of as a master lock. So with an extended public key, you can derive nearly infinite individual public keys and therefore addresses. So you can think about it as, if public keys are used to construct addresses, extended public keys are used to construct wallets. So extended public keys can be shared with wallet software to build a series of addresses. Now, a seed that we touched on in the slide previous to this one, a seed can generate nearly infinite Xpubs. So again, that highlights the importance of your seed. If you can use your seed to generate infinite Xpubs, which can generate infinite public keys, which can generate nearly infinite addresses, it's really, really powerful and really, really important to keep that seed secured. So Xpubs, if you share Xpubs with wallet software to generate addresses, you can think in a multi-signature context that you'd need to share multiple Xpubs. So that leads us into our next key term, or next and final key term, is the wallet configuration file. So a wallet configuration file is the directions to your multi-sig addresses. This is your treasure map to find your multi-signature addresses. So if your multi-signature wallet software is unavailable, you want to have your wallet configuration file or your treasure map with you so you can recover your multi-signature addresses, possibly in a different software. So this wallet configuration file has all of the extended public keys from the keys that are in your quorum. So in a 2 of 3 multi-signature setup, we have 3 total keys. In our wallet configuration file, we're going to have 3 extended public keys, along with some other information that's a part of that treasure map, like the derivation paths that you may see here, starting with that M and going on to a bunch of different numbers all the way up to your address. And then there's additional information like the address type or your quorum size, 2 of 3 being the quorum in this scenario. So the wallet configuration file is just really, really important as that treasure map. With the wallet configuration file and 2 of your keys, you can fully recover and spend your Bitcoin if your current multi-signature wallet software is unavailable. So we recommend securing your wallet configuration file encrypted digitally, possibly in a password manager. For our Unchained vaults, we have a wallet configuration file that can be downloaded, but also we'll show you here today how you can download your wallet configuration file for a do-it-yourself multisig that you build in Caravan. Other multisig wallet softwares allow you to download the configuration file as well. I mean, it is really important to have it and secure it, but if somebody does get access to this wallet configuration file, they're unable to spend your funds. What they would be able to do is find your addresses using the treasure map. They'd be able to see how much Bitcoin you have on your addresses. So they'd say, oh, Buck has 6.15 Bitcoin, and that might lead to additional privacy risks. So that rounds out our key terms. And now we can pause. Justine, did you want to see questions now, or should I pass it on over to Buck?
Go on to Buck. Yeah, he can cover Perfect. What is Caravan, and then yeah, any questions that you guys have, make sure you're dropping them in the Q&A. I'm also monitoring the chat. Some that we can answer in text, we will, but also we'll be just answering a couple as we go along. So yeah, I would say turn it over to Buck, and he can get started on what is Caravan and and how do we use it?
Perfect.
All right, so I think before getting to what Caravan is, it's important, I think, to understand what is multisig. It's so basically just one other key term, because you don't really need something like Caravan unless you're using multisig. So kind of extrapolating further out some of those definitions and the metaphors that Tyler was giving. One of the things that we've used internally as a way to think about what Xpubs are is, or Xpubs especially in a multisig kind of quorum. So you kind of think about it like raffle tickets. So that's what that image is below, where each role would kind of be, if you think about a raffle where you have the private key, which would be the ticket that the raffler keeps, and then the customer would keep the public key, so that you can, or actually no, it'd be reversed, but you would prove that you have the corresponding pair. And so when you're creating a multisig wallet, typically you'll hear it conveyed as something like M of N keys. So that's a 2 of 3. So what you would have is you would have these 3 rolls of tickets, and you expose the public keys, and that would be in the config file, for example, that Tyler was showing earlier. And each one will have its corresponding private key that the members of that multi-signature quorum would keep private, and only need to, they don't even expose it, but you use it to sign when you want to spend from that kind of collaborative address. One of the nice things about this is that, let's say that you are one member of the 3 in a quorum, and your Xpub gets exposed somehow. Luckily, that's only one piece of the treasure map. An attacker, for example, on their own with just one of the Xpubs could not even find out your balances until if you spend. So you would need all 3 of the Xpubs to determine the addresses themselves, to be able to calculate the addresses. So going back to the treasure map, you take those 3 public keys, the 3 Xpubs, and you can combine them together to then get the treasure map. That treasure map leads you to the treasure chest, but then you also need 2 out of those 3 keys in order to unlock the treasure chest. And that's what that box kind of is on the right there. So, all right, now let's go next to what Caravan is. We define Caravan as a stateless coordinator. This is kind of a new term. I think most people that have been using Bitcoin for a while, we're really only familiar, or we talk publicly about something like a wallet, but a wallet doesn't really do justice to what we're doing in Caravan. Because a wallet, if you think about it in the physical space, it's where you keep your money, right? So if somebody takes your wallet, you can take the money out, but you look inside the wallet, you can see how the funds that are in there. So we have this term called stateless coordinator. So let's go through those terms. For a coordinator, it's essentially what we're doing is you're coordinating those Xpubs, those extended public keys together in order to compose that treasure map. So in Caravan, which you'll see in a moment, you put those together. There's a couple other pieces, and with that, you can see the balances of your wallet, kind of. You can see your balances of the addresses associated with those extended public keys. But you can't spend it. Just because you have the treasure map doesn't mean you can spend it. So in Caravan, you can actually share with somebody the treasure map. They can load up that treasure map in Caravan themselves. But if they don't have access to the keys, they still can't spend. Or even if they have access to only one of the keys, they can't spend. So what does it mean to be stateless then? Well, there are some other the kind of multi-sig world has been growing a lot in the past couple of years, and there's a lot of different approaches to this. And the approach that we took with Caravan was we wanted to kind of make it as lightweight as possible. Part of that was because we wanted people to see that you didn't need Unchained capital in order to spend your funds. So if anything happened to us, you didn't need to have to rely on us if you didn't really, if you didn't want to. So we wanted to make something lightweight. What it means to be stateless is in essence, we are using the blockchain as the state of your wallet. So Caravan itself is not maintaining anything about your wallet, about your funds. What you're doing is you coordinate the extended public keys together, you generate the addresses, and then all of our state in the wallet comes from the blockchain. So you look up the addresses to find the balances, and to see, your change versus deposit addresses, everything like that. So when you shut down Caravan, the state goes away. Now, there are some downsides to that, so it really depends on your use case. So some of the other solutions will maintain more state. One of the things that means, for example, is that you can tag tag addresses or transactions, and again, that's maintaining state. If you want to remember what a certain transaction was for or what a deposit was for, you can tag it. That gets maintained. A lot of the solutions as well, they'll come bundled with Bitcoin nodes. So you have all of that state together. The downside of that is it's a lot heavier. So to start that up takes a lot more time, whereas Caravan, you can do it almost instantly. You can do it. We offer it on a hosted version as well, and you can use a hosted version without exposing any of your private key information. So that's a lot harder to do if you're maintaining state, if you're maintaining a Bitcoin node. So in certain use cases like business cases where you want to have a lot more information at hand, or if you don't really need it to be easy to transport, you're going to be keeping kind of like a reference node. Maybe stateless coordinator is not the right tool for you, but if you want the portability, if you want the lightweightness, then something like Caravan might make sense.
Perfect. All right. Let's see here. So thank you for that, Buck. We're just reviewing a few of the questions here. One of the ones, a couple of these I'm going to save to the end, guys, but one of the ones is kind of asking for more information to describe the multisig address. I think it's kind of relevant here. The question is, when you're sending Bitcoin to a multisig quorum, can you send to just one of the addresses derived from one of the quorums of the Xpubs? Or is it a separate multi-sig address? But could you maybe go into a little bit of how that works? So like you're using multiple keys and how those work independently as Xpubs, and then also what you're actually creating when you create a multi-sig address and how those are different when you're sending Bitcoin to them, perhaps?
Sure. So for one thing I'd say is that if you did have, okay, so let's start here. One of the kind of nice things about multisig is you actually maintain some privacy until an address is spent from. So the way that Bitcoin multisig works today is you create this combination of the public keys that are derived from the Xpubs. Then they get created into a multisig script. That script gets hashed together, and from there you derive the address. And what is shown on the blockchain when you're depositing to that basically the script is private. There's no way to reverse. Again, if anyone's familiar with hashing in Bitcoin or otherwise in cryptography, you can't reverse that action. So you might see this address on the blockchain, but until that extended public key is exposed, or the public keys in that quorum are exposed, you won't even know how to send it to them. But that being so, you wouldn't be able to do it before. Once it's spent from, that public key gets exposed, and you could derive an address from that public key, but I would not do that. For one thing, is that wallets and seeds will use different derivation paths for different purposes. And these derivation paths are important as a way to signal to a device, a hardware device, basically the key store that is maintaining the private keys. It indicates to that key store where to find the private key that corresponds to that public key, because they could be anywhere in there. And as Tyler was explaining earlier, there's an infinite possibilities where that can come from. So if you did that, there's a chance that they might not be able to easily find the private key associated with it. You could do it, but it would just be, it's more trouble than it's worth. You should just get a normal address. But the nice thing is you can use the same seed for a single sig wallet as you would for a multi-sig wallet. So you can use the same device, for example, if you needed to, but I wouldn't send to it without the owner's knowledge of it, because it might just basically become disappeared.
Perfect. Yeah. So you can use them independently, and then obviously, as Buck said, when you create a multi-sig quorum, then it's actually creating a new type of address. So great. All right, so we're going to get turned over to Tyler, who's going to walk us through actually creating a wallet in Caravan. So yeah, you guys keep those questions coming. I do have them here, saving some of them for the end, but yeah, keep them coming. And yeah, thanks, Tyler.
Cool, awesome. I'm going to move over now to Caravan. So you should now be seeing on my screen the Caravan site in my Google Chrome browser. You can access Caravan at caravanmultisig.com. It'll redirect here to our GitHub page. But also, if you are technically inclined and have your own GitHub account, you can boot up Caravan for yourself, so you don't have to rely on Unchained Capital's GitHub account as well. So when you go to caravanmultisig.com and you're taken here, you're going to be met with a welcome screen. It's going to give you a bunch of helpful information talking about, being a stateless multisig coordinator, all that information that Buck was just going through. Talk about keys and how we support entering public keys so we can, combine them to generate multi-signature addresses. And then we'll also give you some information about consensus. By default, Caravan does connect to blockstream.info, but we do have the ability for you to connect to your own full node as well. And then on the right-hand side, there's some educational material and resources, along with just information on supported devices and supported web browsers as well. So to both construct a DIY or do-it-yourself multi-sig wallet, or to recover a wallet using that wallet configuration file that I was going over in the key terms, you can select wallet in the middle of the screen, kind of highlighted in blue. And when you do that, you're going to be taken to a page where you can either import your extended public keys or import a wallet configuration file. So if you're an Unchained Capital Vaults customer and you need to do a recovery, you can make use of that wallet configuration file that we provide. Or as Buck was mentioning, if you're using a more stateful multi-sig wallet software and you have a wallet configuration file and maybe you're not with your device physically, but you do want to conduct a spend or receive to it, you can import that wallet configuration file here as well. So today I'm actually going to construct a DIY multi-signature wallet here in Caravan. I have three hardware devices with me. I have a Trezor, a Ledger, and a Cold Card. So I'm going to use all three of them and construct a 2 of 3 multi-signature wallet. So before I do that, on the right-hand side, I want to go through kind of each of these elements really quickly. We do have the quorum that you can specify. So if you wanted to make a 2 of 2 or a 3 of 5, we default to 2 of 3, and that's what I'm going to be showing here today. We have the quorum option. We also have the address type. So we have, your legacy P2SH addresses all the way up through native SegWit addresses. So we do have kind of the fine print here for native SegWit for best practices, P2SH or legacy for greatest compatibility. So you do have that flexibility to choose your address type. Then we can also select between mainnet or testnet Bitcoin. We're going to stay on mainnet for this demo here. And then we also have the Bitcoin client option. By default, again, it is connected publicly to blockstream.info's API for consensus, but you do have the ability to connect privately to your own full node as well. So I'm going to go through the process of importing my Xpubs or my extended public keys from my devices here. And I'm going to name my wallet first and foremost, and we can name it Webinar Wallet and confirm. And then go on to name our first key. I'm going to name my first key Shadow. And then I'm going to select a method. So I'm going to select one of the hardware key stores or hardware devices that we support. And this first one that I'm going to choose is my Trezor, because I have my Trezor with me. And what you're going to see here when you select your device is the BIP32 path or the derivation path. So taking you again all the way from that seed, that list of 12 words I have in my Trezor all the way up through the addresses. It's going to be packaged together in a wallet configuration file later. So this is really important to have. If you are very technical and are familiar with BIP32 paths, you can edit this yourself, maybe if you want this to be a different account number, but you can just keep it as the default value as well. Then you select the model of the Trezor device you're working with. So today I'm working with a Model T. And I'm going to plug in my Model T and I'm going to export my extended public key. So I have a device here that I've plugged into my computer. I'm going to enter my PIN on the device. and select import extended public key. It'll open up Trezor Connect. Okay, I'm gonna try that one more time. And Unchained Capital.github, so Caravan's gonna allow or ask me to allow once for this session, and I'm going to select that, then select export multiple public keys. Once I do that, I'm going to be taken back to Caravan, and we're going to see that Xpub followed by a long string of letters and numbers. That is your extended public key. So we have now our extended public key, our derivation path, and the name of our key here. So we can move on to importing our second extended public key. So this one I'm going to name super. You may see where this is going, but I'll save it for the end. Now we have super, and I'm going to select it to be a ledger this time. So I have a ledger, and I'm going to do the same process. You're going to see the same information. You also have a BIP32 path for this key as well. I'm working today with a Ledger Nano X, so I'm going to plug that in. And I'm going to enter my PIN code on my device. And once I enter the PIN code, you want to make sure with the Ledger devices to open up the Bitcoin app. It should say application is ready on the device. I'm going to select import extended public key. Pretty swift process. The same thing that happened for our first key, Shadow. We've imported the extended public key, and we have our BIP32 path here. For our third key, I'm going to use a cold card. So we do support cold card in Caravan, and PSBT, which is a partially signed Bitcoin transaction. So if we were going to use cold card to sign for a transaction in Caravan, once we create this wallet, we would download a partially signed Bitcoin transaction file onto an SD card to put into our cold card, sign it, and then import the signed transaction into Caravan as well. So our last key name is going to be coder. So we have Shadow, Super, Coder as the three keys, and this key is going to be cold card as the method. And now we have the option to export the Xpub from a cold card. So to do that, you'd go to settings on your device, down to multisig wallets, and then export Xpub, and you'd enter 0 for that account number following what's noted up here for the BIP32 path. But I already have that uploaded into my computer, so you don't have to wait for me to swap my SD cards back and forth. So I'm just going to select the upload button and upload my JSON file from my cold card. And now we have, the webinar wallet and all of the details associated with this wallet. So the extended public keys that we've just added, the BIP32 paths for each key, so taking you from your seed all the way to your address. And we have the name of the keys, just as, kind of for fun. So right here, before I select confirm, what you can do is download these wallet details, and this is your wallet configuration file. So this is going to be very, the exact same thing as what I was showing you on that last key term. Having that wallet configuration file, using this information, you can find your multi-signature addresses. So this is your treasure map. So if I click confirm here, we're going to, construct multi-signature addresses from all of these different extended public keys. And we can see here now that we have our webinar wallet with 0 Bitcoin in it. And if we select receive on the middle of the screen, we're going to be provided with both a QR code representation of the address, which was our first key term, as well as a text version of the address down on bottom that you can copy to your clipboard and paste somewhere if you want to be sending Bitcoin to that address. On the addresses portion of the screen, you can select 0 balance if you want to see all of the addresses that are associated with your multisig wallet, kind of starting from that 0th position, going all the way down. We don't have any funds, so clicking send is really not going to allow us to do much because we can't transfer Bitcoin anywhere. But what we can do is import an address. We can set the amount of Bitcoin we'd be sending and actually edit our fee rate as well. So Buck is going to go into some really, really awesome advanced features of Caravan, UTXO selection, which is coin control, commonly referred to in other wallet softwares as coin control. and child pays for parent, bunch of really, really awesome things. So this was more so to set the stage, just to show you that you can create a do-it-yourself multi-signature wallet in Caravan. What we can do here now also, download the configuration file and make sure we have that. So I'll always have the details for my webinar wallet if I want to construct it somewhere else, or we can just clear the wallet. And now we're taken right back to where we started, because again, we are a stateless multi-sig coordinator. That's what we're working with in Caravan. So I'm going to go back to our presentation here and pass it over to Buck to go through the advanced features.
Awesome. And we might want to take just a quick pause real quick and answer one or two questions if you guys are okay with that. That was great, Tyler. I know there are some questions that are a little bit more general that we'll save till the end. And if you're in this webinar and this is a little more technical than you were prepared for, a little more advanced, this is definitely more of advanced features. So next week, Tyler and I are going to be going over in detail of how to use Caravan as an external recovery for Unchained Capital clients. But one of the questions that I did see that I thought we could answer really quickly, and I saw Buck was attempting to answer there, was just the question about using multiple devices for different addresses, right? So if you have an Unchained Capital vault and you've used devices to create that vault, can you also come into Caravan and now create a new wallet with those devices? So Tyler, maybe if you don't mind, since you were just doing that in Caravan, if you don't mind taking that one real quick and explaining what would need to be changed, if anything, and if that's possible.
Yeah, it's certainly possible, because we don't want you to go out and buy new devices all the time as you're constructing different multi-sig wallets. What you'd want to do, and Buck, you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but as you're adding your keys, as you're kind of adding those extended public keys right away, you may want to change the derivation path. So that last 0 that was showing on our derivation path here, and I can flip back over to Caravan real quick. If I'm using my Trezor and I want to add the extended public key for my Trezor device to create a new wallet within Caravan, what I might want to do here is change this last 0 to a 1, which changes our account. That is the account level depth in the BIP32 derivation path. And what that's going to do is actually import an entirely new extended public key. Because remember when I was talking about earlier, you can derive nearly infinite extended public keys or Xpubs from a seed that is stored on a device. So you would change that last 0 to a 1 to give you a new Xpub to use, but you're all still at the end of the day mapping back to your same hardware device.
Tyler, could you click on the different address types, because people
Yes.
can see that it actually changes the path.
Yes, so right here I have the legacy address type selected, P2SH, and if you keep your eye on the BIP32 path, as I change these address types, we are going to change the 45 that was showing the M45 prime. You're going to see the 48, and it's going to change for that last level depth as well.
So for people that aren't super familiar with the paths, this is kind of like a piece of that treasure map, and this is actually something that is needed for the, as I was talking earlier, for the device when you're signing to know how to find that Xpub. So you don't actually need the paths for the watch only to see the addresses. The Xpub itself is good enough, but those paths are necessary for determining the private keys, telling the device where to find those keys. So you kind of need two maps, one map to find the treasure chest and another map to find the key itself. And that's what that BIP32 path has. I would also caution about getting too creative with those paths, because some hardware devices, many of them now, are quite opinionated about what they expect that to be. So try not to change more than that last index number, and not to a crazy high number or anything like that either. So try and increment them and make sure you're keeping track of them as well, because if you lose that number, if you lose that path, then you won't be able to sign for those funds.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. And I just wanted to confirm, just because there was one question about this. Craig's asking if this is different than creating a vault with Unchained Capital. And yes, very much it is. So when you create a vault with Unchained Capital, you're creating a collaborative custody quorum, where Unchained Capital is a trusted third party who's holding one of your keys. What we're demonstrating today is actually creating your own multi-sig wallet within Caravan independently outside of Unchained Capital. So very much different. We do have webinars about creating those vaults within Unchained Capital. And like I mentioned, Tyler and I will be discussing using Caravan as an Unchained client next week. But yes, what we're discussing is different from that. So to kind of get it keep flowing, if I can speak today, we do have a lot to kind of cover in the next section that Buck's going to go over the advanced features of UTXO selection, child pays per parent, and testing suite. So Tyler, if you don't mind just stopping your screen share, we'll let Buck take over and he will do that demo. And then we will try to get to the rest of these questions after, guys. If there are some that don't get answered, we'll try to do so in text form. But yes, keep the questions coming.
Okay, so we're going to talk about 3 advanced features. I don't think we're going to have too much time to go over the testing suite, so I might just go over that quickly first. But just to get some definitions out of the way to help kind of set the stage, UTXO selection, also known as coin control or coin selection, is there's a few reasons why you might want to do it. You can actually you can do it in ways that destroy privacy, but also you can use it in ways to improve privacy. It's also a way to help reduce fees. So you can do something that's called UTXO consolidation, which takes, if you have a lot of UTXOs, for example, with small amounts, let's say you're DCAing into your wallet, and you have a lot of small ones, the more UTXOs you use to do a spend, the more expensive that spend will be because there's more data in that. So using UTXO selection coin control can help reduce your overall fee burden over a long period of time. For anybody that's interested in learning more about that, we have, here we go. We have a blog post on our website, what the fees that I wrote that kind of goes into a lot more depth on this question. So I recommend reading that if you're curious about how UTXO selection can help. CPFP, or child pays for parent, is another advanced feature, and that is a what that is essentially, if you think about a parent transaction, is you send a transaction out and it turns out that the fees were really low. You didn't realize that all the miners got shut down in China, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of congestion on the network, and a transaction sitting there for longer than you were comfortable with. And maybe it's been a few hours and you kind of wanted to get through. You didn't have RBF, which is another advanced feature, which we're not going to talk about today, but that stands for replace by fee. Child pays for parent is basically saying that you can send a child transaction that spends from the parent's transaction and basically has a fee high enough to pay for both transactions. And what that's essentially doing is incentivizing a miner to say, oh, well, I really want that child transaction that has a really high fee, but the only way that I can get that child transaction is if I include the parent transaction. So Caravan allows you to do this where you do exactly that, where you can have one transaction that spends from my pending transactions outputs. The testing suite is something that's included in Caravan, and it's a way essentially to test out hardware devices. And let's go to that real quick. So this is, if you're in Caravan and you click on the run test, we use this internally at Unchained as a way to test out when there's new device firmwares that go out, so that we can ensure that before we recommend to our customers that they upgrade their devices, that everything is working as expected. If you've been backing up your seeds, and you don't really have to worry too much about it. And so even if something does break, you can recover somewhere else. But you can see here on the left side, I picked a ledger because that's what I've got in my hand right now. And you can see that these are the different tests. So can you export an Xpub for mainnet, testnet? Can you sign transactions? One of the things that I think is actually really cool about this, the way to do it is we basically have these test words. So we are publicly giving a set of a seed phrase, which we don't recommend you do with your own seed phrase, but we're making this public because we need the test to be standardized. The tests run essentially on a 2 of 2 multi-sig address. all of them. So there's one that's private, that's not released to the public. And because this is multisig, you can really understand the strength of multisig. We can relatively comfortably release one of those seed phrases without having the funds be at risk. So you can actually sign these transactions, but unless you have the second key, which is private, we have mainnet funds here. So there's like real Bitcoin at stake. And unless you have that second set of keys, then the funds are safe. So this is nice if you wanted to play around. I recommend doing it on a device that you're not using, just to be safe. But you can see if new hardware firmware updates work or not, or if you're developing your own thing. For example, we have Cold Card, which is just basically PSBT. You can play around with other hardware devices there too. Okay, so here we're going to start with UTXO selection. I have a Caravan wallet that I already set up. This is running on RegTest, which is essentially, it's a testing network. I'm running a whole kind of test Bitcoin network locally on my computer. This is something developers use when you need to have predictability, because I can basically mine blocks on my own. I can choose not to mine blocks, which is useful for the child pays for parent. And I don't have to worry about fees or losing funds or waiting for faucets or anything like that. So that's what I have here. And let's start with so we have my list of addresses. These are funds that I have available that are, and actually one of the nice things here too, is if you open up an address, this is the redeem script. This is what is exposed to the network when you're spending. You can do confirm on device, which is just confirming that that device is one of the key holders in that quorum. And here are the UTXOs. So you can see here that I have one address that has had 3 different spends to it. So this could happen. Let's say you have a donation address that you've put somewhere public, and people are sending lots of donations. If you have too many, spending all of them can be too much work actually for a hardware device to sign, because they're very limited capacity on the hardware devices. And so this can be a really useful feature to spend in pieces to reduce that burden. So if I go over to send, Tyler was showing the automatic mode, which will basically automatically choose do the UTXO selection for you. But if you want a little bit more control, you can go over to manual over here. Now we can see here, let's say I want to spend from this UTXO, which has 0.3 BTC, and I'm going to spend this whole address, which has 0.99 BTC. I'm going to send to my own address, and I'm going to spend the full amount, but the fee rate is really low. So we'll come back to that later in a second. So again, hopefully you can see what's going on here. I picked one out of the 3 UTXOs available on this address. I picked another one that has only one input associated with it, and preview. Now I can sign it. One thing with RegTest is I can only, Trezor doesn't support signing on non-existent networks. And that's because they actually confirm transactions on their own nodes. So I am using a ledger which doesn't have the same constraint, and review the outputs. Okay. Device is signing. All right, so this is my finalized transaction. Okay, successfully broadcast. Now, if we refresh, you can see I have this. This is pending. This is the spend that's pending. So you can see this full amount here. And this one now only has 2 UTXOs. Okay, so now okay, so that was UTXO selection. Now let's see if we can do a child pays for parent. So what's interesting here is we have this pending input, right? So let's say my fee was too low. I'm waiting for a couple hours, nothing's going through. Now, how do I handle this? I want to go back to send. I'm going to go here. I have this pending UTXO. I can now select that. So this is kind of mixing 2 things. This is also showing why you might want to do UTXO selection, because if you did the auto mode, it might not pick that one and help you with what you want to do. So what I'm going to do is pick that and pay back to myself. Now, let's say, okay, I just need to send, I'm going to send one, I'm going to add another output. This is going to be the change. So you can even use this to pay somebody else if you wanted to. Now I'm going to increase the fee rate. All right, those buttons just adjust the output based off of the fees that you've picked. Preview transaction. Going to go back through the same signing process. This is nothing different. The devices don't care, don't have to know about the blockchain at all. They're just saying, hey, do I recognize, or for, in some cases, like the ledgers basically say, okay, are you okay signing this? And you're going to say yes. But yeah, so all it cares about is you're giving it some data, and are you okay signing with the key? And you say yes, and it'll give back the signature. Okay. Broadcast the transaction. Let's see what we've got. So now I've got two pending. So this was the previously spent one. Now I have the address. Child pays for parent. All good. Now I'm going to mine once. And again, I think, let's see, goes through. There we go. Now you can see that this which was a different output before, we spent a little bit more towards fees. So that will change the final kind of count from what it otherwise would have been. But the funds are back in my wallet, and the transaction's confirmed. And that is child pays for parent and UTXO selection.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Beck. All right, so we've got some great questions. We've got about 10 minutes. We're going to try to go through as many of these as we can. So the first one that I'm seeing, which was asked a little bit earlier by Carl, and maybe Buck, you can take this because I know you did answer in chat, but we want to make sure it's on the recording as well. So Carl was asking Xpub, YPub, Zpubs, are they all the same?
They are essentially all the same. They, so as I mentioned in the chat, you might have seen my answer and not known the context, but the definition that Tyler was giving for an extended public key applies. All of those are extended public keys. They're just different serializations. So Xpubs, it's not anything that's like on the blockchain, but it is a way for devices and coordinators to derive the public keys and the addresses. So the different serializations, YPub, Zpub, is just giving information about the purpose of what that extended public key might be used for. Similar actually in how the paths are derived. So I forget exactly what the mapping is, but for example, one is saying that it is SegWit, and another is saying that it's used for multisig. And that's just basically saying, hey, I was derived from a different path. So it's just sharing some information, but they're essentially the same. And I'm 90% sure that if you paste, there's other serializations as well, like UPub and VPub. We will, in Caravan, will convert that back to a normal Xpub, but keeping that information is still maintained, but the UI is really just supporting Xpub. But we'll do that conversion in the background.
Awesome. I had to find my mute button. All right, perfect. Okay, we have a couple more questions. Like I said, some of them are a little bit more general, and then others are kind of specific. I did want to say, Jeff in the audience, he was saying this was awesome. He's lost, but his head is expanding. Totally understandable. Like we said, this is a very technical webinar. These are very advanced features for individuals who are perhaps building within wallets within Caravan on their own. These are also features that you may use through Unchained Capital to push transactions out and so forth. So just wanted to say you're not alone. It's totally okay. Wanted to remind everyone that if you are curious about how to use Caravan as an external recovery, what that means is, let's say that you're using Unchained Capital as collaborative custody to ensure that you're never dependent on us. We want to ensure that we ourselves are not a single point of failure for you. We have Caravan as an external recovery tool for you. You can always access your funds, even if Unchained Capital did not exist anymore. And next week, Tyler and I are going to be doing a deep dive on that showing you what a configuration file is, where to find it within your vault, and how to use Caravan to recover that, as well as encrypt that file. So there was a question earlier about if you can encrypt the wallet configuration file and if you should. Yes, you should. One really great way to do so, and I'll just kind of answer this question and also allude to the fact that Tyler and I are going to do this next week, is using like a password manager to actually attach that file and encrypt it and then save it within that as well. So really great way to save that configuration file. But one of the questions was, when you're wanting to recover a multi-sig wallet, do you need all 3 Xpubs, but do you also need the seeds? So perhaps Tyler, you could take that one, maybe just discussing the difference between actually spending after recovery and what's needed for recovery specifically.
Can I just say one real quick on the encryption?
Of course.
Make sure if you've encrypted it with a password, make sure you don't forget that password, and make sure you will have access to it, because even if you have access to the devices, if you lose the pads, for example, or the Xpub, you could still lose access to the funds. So even if you have 2 out of the 3 keys, you need to have that treasure map to the 3rd key to spend, even if you don't need to sign it. So if you do encrypt, make sure you're very careful about that. You don't lose any security by exposing it publicly. So if you think that that's a risk, better not to encrypt and still have access to it.
Yeah, that's a very good point on that. And I've also, had people ask me if they should save it, on a micro SD card in particular. And like, that's certainly an option. But then, your wallet configuration file is kind of tied down to a physical location on that micro SD card. And that might not be with you while you're traveling or on the go, or in a situation where you might need to, recover your funds. So putting it somewhere in an encrypted password manager or secured on the cloud is probably a good idea, just so you can have multiple access points. Sorry, I just wanted to jump in there, but Justine, the question originally was, do you need to have your seeds with you when you do a wallet recovery? Is that correct? Cool. So when you are recovering your wallet file, you take your that wallet configuration file that I showed on the key terms that we downloaded when we used our Caravan tool to build a do-it-yourself multi-sig, and that is again the treasure map to the addresses themselves. So you'd be able to see balances and you'd be able to see addresses with that wallet configuration file. But in order to spend funds, in order to actually move funds from that wallet config or from those addresses, you would need your keys, your devices, and ultimately, if you have your seed words, you can use your seeds to recover. If you do, let's say you have your wallet configuration file, but your devices are lost, but you have the seeds that were generated by both of those devices, you could take your seeds and recover them on a new device per se, and then use that device as a signer. So the device, going back to kind of the key terms we were talking about, the private keys, the device is meant to be a key store, and then also it knows how to use that private key to sign for transactions. So your device is going to be your signer. So I guess in a roundabout way, you do need your seeds, but not if you have your devices. Buck, is there anything you want to add to that?
No.
Okay,
cool. That sounds right.
Perfect. There was a question as well about, sorry, I was reading multiple questions. There was a question about whitelisting addresses. This is more of a general one, but I think it's kind of an important one, and Buck may have an opinion on it. I kind of have an opinion as well. Many exchanges give you the option to whitelist an address. It's great for the idea of that you can only then send to that address, right? And so that if somebody comes in and tries to add an additional address in the exchange itself, exchanges are a single point of failure though. So there's a lot of issues there. For Unchained Capital, when you're moving funds from an exchange to our vault, I personally feel like you should not be whitelisting addresses, but using a fresh address, making sure you have the correct deposit address so you're not sending it to an old address. But maybe Buck, you could touch really quickly. They're asking, perhaps what does that mean for privacy's sake, and maybe just an overall general quick recommendation on that?
Yeah, I think for privacy, you're not losing too much more than like if you send 10 transactions that add up to 1 Bitcoin to one address versus sending 1 transaction that is of 1 Bitcoin, same privacy loss. So it's not a huge difference there, although if you do it to different addresses each time, then you're splitting it up. So there's not a way to link the different addresses to each other. you're creating new UTXOs with a new address each time. There's a few risks associated, I think, with whitelisting. One is what I was saying earlier. I think the cold card maxes the number of inputs it'll sign at 20, and that's just, again, because of the hardware constraints associated with the cryptography for doing the signatures, which gets even heavier with multisig. So you could be sitting there, like even below that limit, it can take a while for some of the devices to sign. So if you've whitelisted and you're sending all to the same address, it can just be a heavy burden. Also, there's the fee consideration, UTXO consolidation, essentially. So I talk about this a little bit in the fees blog post, but it's cheaper to send one large UTXO than it is to send 10 small ones. And that's just the way that the Bitcoin network operates and the fee market. So, if you're not worried about the exchange going down or sealing your funds in the next 6 months, there's a risk there, of course, but you can wait every 6 months and then send to one address and update it that way. So different things to consider based off of your own situation.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And we only have about 1 more minute, so we're going to do one more question, and then we will try to get through some of these maybe next week as well. So one of the questions was, if you're setting up multisig with, let's say, Trezor and Ledger, and you have the wallet configuration file for that, in the future, can you then upgrade your hardware device to perhaps a cold card or something else? And then what do you do as far as that configuration file itself?
Yeah, so I guess I can take that. So yeah, the master seeds and the paths and the Xpubs, it's all really device agnostic. So you can recover the seed into other devices. The one kind of gotcha is that if the devices have different standards around what paths they will sign at, but you can check that ahead of time. In any case, just to confirm that it's not a concern, or if you've gotten locked out of funds, if it says it won't sign and you're sure that it's right, you can always pester the developers or find someone to fork the code and load it up on a custom piece of hardware itself. So anyway, long story short, it's totally possible and doable. The configuration file is a very useful treasure map to use in all different types of circuits. You could use it in an Electrum as well to sign, or yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, so those seed phrases are your key, and you can upgrade the hardware devices. But yes, you will need some information depending on which device you're switching into. Well, this has been great. I hope you guys all found this beneficial. These webinars are going to be happening every 2 weeks, once a month publicly, and then you will get the recorded of a client-only exclusive webinar that will be happening as well. So if you are an Unchained client, be sure you're watching your email and you're signed up for the newsletter. We do have one happening next week for external recovery. So if you have questions about that as well, make sure you tune into that. You can always catch this information on Unchained Capital's YouTube channel. And of course, always reach out to Unchained Capital if you have any questions or want to set up a free consultation to learn more. We offer collaborative custody, and our concierge service will actually walk you through every step of that process, including how to set up hardware devices. So I see some questions in the audience that are very general and just like, what's a device? How do I use it? Concierge service may be really great for you. So check unchained.com, look into that, maybe set up a consultation, which is free. With that, we're going to go ahead and end the webinar today. But like I said, we will be back next week. Thanks again to everybody for joining, and thank you, Tyler and Buck, for the great information and also joining me today.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.